Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Centers. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss and brain so that they connect better with their family and friends and remain independent. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First, the hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then when he passed away. I am an ear, nose, and throat doctor who only cares for E. I'm the E of ENT. I've taken care of tens of thousands of patients with nerve hearing loss and performed over 10,000 ear surgeries in my career. I'm the founder of Listen Up Hearing Center, and I've written a book of the same name, Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to www.listenuphearing.com. That's www.listenuphearing.com. Today, I'm excited to have a great guest. It's Dr. Turri. He's an award-winning audiologist and has transformed over 20,000 people's lives in the villages in Florida and the surrounding areas since 2007. His goal is to provide high-quality, compassionate hearing care to all of his patients, which is awesome. He's author of a great book, Back to Active, Change Your Life with Total Hearing Health. He presents nationally about hearing loss and cognition and the role of hearing care plays in cognitive health. We are excited to have him on this as a guest on the podcast. Al, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Mark, for having us. I really appreciate the invitation.
We're lucky to have him. I think he was sick once, and then we just had a hurricane that went through Florida. So the podcast gods have not been, they've been trying to sabotage us, and we've had some technology issues. So we're finally connected, which is awesome. And I appreciate his diligence to get through. So Al, tell me, you're what I would consider a master clinician. Tell me about your pathway to where you are now in terms of your passion about hearing care.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a long, windy road, and believe it or not, I was supposed to be a lawyer early in life, and I wound up going back to become a speech pathologist after I sold a business. I was a wholesale florist, if you can imagine that. Sold that, went back to school, and did 28 postbac requirements for a master's in speech pathology. Luckily, the last 3 credits was Intro to Audiology. The professor there in Reno was a retired private practitioner. He made us shadow 3 practices. And 2 of those practices, people were getting fit with hearing aids for the first time. I'll never forget, the hair rose on the back of my neck. I got goosebumps, and I just knew it was for me. And fortunately, for the last 21 years, I have never felt like I've worked a day in my life because I just love what I do. I love that reward of giving people back their connection to the world. And as time goes by, we just know that treating hearing loss and connecting people to the world is so much more than just hearing now. We know it's good for memory. We know it's good for cognition. We know it's good for quality of life. We know it reduces fall risk. It's just awesome. So I'm fortunate to do what I love every day.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you're really transforming people's lives, which is a wonderful gift to be able to have. And so, I love to ask people who have been doing this for a long time about their craft. One of the things that is always like challenging is kind of a patient who actually doesn't think they have hearing loss. Like, so if you told me, hey, Mark, you have hearing loss, and I say, I don't think I have any hearing loss, I think the listeners would love to hear somebody who's, at the top of their practice in this. So what do you tell patients like that?
Well, I've learned over the years that honesty is the best policy, and education is the best policy. So my goal with those folks, and it's actually probably one of the most rewarding things I do, right? You've got the guy or the girl that come in and their arms are crossed. And I don't have any problems. I just like the TV loud, or whatever the case may be.
Or they mumble. They mumble.
Yes. Yeah, everybody mumbles, right? And an hour later, they're shaking your hand and thanking you because you're about to order them their hearing aids. So the way it works, Mark, in my practice is from the beginning. When you call my office and schedule an appointment, we're going to start educating you right then. We're going to email you a copy of my book. We'll mail you a hard copy or give you a hard copy when you come in, but we want you to start reading it as soon as possible, so that we can educate you on the causes, on the implications, on the ramifications of hearing loss. So by the time patients get to me, typically they're educated. And we start the conversation off essentially with, do you have any questions from the book? And we dive right into their symptoms. And it's very clear that most of these folks are not like this anymore after a short conversation. And I think the big key for us, especially as of late, is the whole ear to brain connection. Since we've been screening cognition as part of our hearing consultation and educating people on the connection from the ear to the brain, that seems to open the door. Folks that historically would not move forward, when we start talking about that and you screen their cognition and you show them their executive function score or their memory score, all of a sudden they're much more open to telling you how they worked in the foundry for 20 years, or how they went hunting every duck season, or whatever the noise exposure. They tend to own it more, and they tend to be more interested in not delaying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, so it's totally. And so, it's an interesting, executive function. I mean, people use that term, so when you explain that to patients, how do you explain it? Like, not how are you able to, what is your explanation? Of course, I know you're able to.
Yeah, so I tie it in, Mark, with speech and noise. The ability to focus on what they want to focus on and ignore or put aside the stuff they don't want to hear. We know with speech and noise testing their score, we know there's an auditory component, but we also know that executive function plays a key role in that. So I dummy it down. Obviously, I don't go into a lot of detail as far as the science, but I basically say, look, this test that you've just told me you've got some difficulty in social settings. I'm now going to do a test that assesses your ability. It's going to put a number on it. I get halfway through that. They're obviously having trouble with it. I said, look, this seems really challenging. So remember, there is an auditory component to this, but we also talked about your memory and cognition, how I'm going to screen it. I'm going to do that when you get out of the booth, and I'm going to tie it all together. But based on this, I want to see, in addition to the auditory component, is cognition playing a role?
No, that's great. I love this stuff because, when people are as well practiced as you've kind of figured out how to communicate it effectively, which I think is awesome, and really what the art of this practice is.
And the key, Mark, is keeping it simple. I think early in my career, and I think a lot of my colleagues in the field will tell you, we spend a lot of time talking people out of treatment because we want to dazzle them with how much we know, or make sure we educate them completely. And don't get me wrong, education is important, but it gets to a point where if you go too much, you confuse them, or you give them something more they got to think about for a while. So I like to keep it simple, make sure I give them the facts and tie it all together, and make sure they understand how treatment's going to help.
Yeah, that's really great. And so, obviously you go through the consultative practice of, selecting the appropriate instrument and all of that. And, we'll leave that to, people doing it. And, I think everybody can identify with that. Right.
Sure.
And so, and actually, there's obviously a lot of standards on how to program it. What to me is like, so you order their devices, their technology, it comes in. Do you do anything to preset or to help educate them about what that process is going to be like? So if you say, like, before the day they come, do you do anything to?
Yeah. So we emphasize best practices, right? So a big part of that is questionnaires on the front end, making sure that we can quantify with a validated tool their handicap, if you will.
Do you do a handicap index or something, or?
Correct. And the SSQ 12, I think, is the other one that we use. I always forget if it's 12 or 13. I forget, but it's one of those.
Yeah.
And we use a tinnitus handicap inventory as well. We use a COSI as well, modified COSI as well. So capturing
for the listeners, these are validated surveys, asking various things in terms of how people's hearing loss impacts them, how aware they are, their tinnitus. These are scientifically validated tools. I'm sorry, I just wanted to.
No, that's yeah. Thank you for clarifying that for the listeners. But these tools allow me to identify their report of handicap, because a lot of times people people will tell you I don't have a problem, but they take the handicaps where they take the questionnaire and it teases out what's happening. And then the next piece to this is I have a really big screen TV and I'm programming their hearing aids. I'm setting them up for real verification. So I let them know what I'm doing while they're sitting there looking at the big screen.
Right? So it's not right?
Yeah. And then the real winner for everybody is I fit them to target and I explain to them why this is important. I like to talk about that Sprint commercial. I think it was, can you hear me now? Or was that Verizon? I forget.
Verizon,
Look, I said, it's real easy for me to ask you if you can hear me, but I don't want your perception of this. I want to validate with science that I am fitting you to your target, to your prescription. And that's where we're going to start. So just walking them through that process, it doesn't take long. And they love it. They love to hear about it. They love to be a part of it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a real ear novice. I just don't practice it, obviously. So
Sure.
Do you try to do 3 or 5 dB within targets?
I get as close as I can, and I'd be happy with 5. That's the best I can do, Mark. I'd like to get to.
There are some constraints with the instrument. Even if you want to get close, you can't always.
Absolutely. But most of the time you can get within that 3 to 5 range for sure. Now, just because I get there, right, doesn't mean the patient always loves it. So I also explain to the patient I'm going to use a physical therapy approach. So I make sure I can fit to target as close as I can. I validate and verify the fit. And then if there's still issues at day 1, I back them off. I lower, and then weekly I see them, and little by little I get them up to those targets. So we fit the target, but we don't always leave them there on day 1, which you'll get different opinions in audiology on whether that's right or wrong. But I tend to find that if I work them up to target over time, they adapt with less headaches, if you know what I mean.
I think that the common complaint that everything's too loud when they're first fit, and that I hear things I don't want to hear. It, to some extent, is based on people being fit to target right away, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And if it's too loud for their subjective comfort, they're not going to wear it. So I definitely turn them down if I need to, and then I work them up over time.
And so do you tell them anything to this is great. I mean, I love you sharing with us. Thanks. What do you tell them to expect during the beginning? Is there anything because it's for a lot of them, it's first timers. I get it. People who are coming back for refitting is different than the first time people. And so, when you're really working your magic, not that it doesn't happen when you do the refit, but it's that first time where you're really helping them through that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So at that fitting visit, right, that hour-long appointment, we spend some time on the science, and then it's all about educating them from start to finish. I got to teach them how to put them on. I got to teach them how to take them off. I got to teach them how to clean them, how to put them on the charger. I connect their cell phone. I show them how to use the app. You name it, all these things, right? Sure. But most importantly, I don't put any preconceived expectations in their head. I let them know, listen, this is your journey. It's individualized to you. There's 3 things I want you to pay attention to. 1, I want you to put them on and wear them all day unless you're going to get wet. If you're going to get wet, take them off. No, secondly, if there's any pain or discomfort, take them off and call me right away. You've been wearing it. By this time, they've already been wearing them 10, 15 minutes, right? And there's no pain. So they don't have pain. But I want to make sure they know that if they have that, give me a call. And then thirdly, I let them know, you're going to tell me next time we get together, the first thing we're going to talk about is anything you didn't like. And that floors some of my audiology colleagues. Most people try to avoid negatives. I like to get them out.
Get to the elephant in the room, right? Because those are their problems, and they're only going to treat their hearing loss if you talk about what they don't like, right?
Exactly. And I let them know your list could be really small, it could be really large, but that's why we're getting together weekly for the next 3 or 4 weeks, because we're going to adapt. You're going to adapt to this, and I'm here as your coach to help you through it. And then we send them home with a book called 5 Keys, and they get put on an email program with 5 keys, which is an automated.
I talked to her the other week. It's a great program.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's great. And then we also use Don Hyman's Hearing Wellness Journey, which is an even more involved process. If you haven't talked to her, I'd encourage you to reach out. She's a great proponent for all this.
That's great. And so that's really great stuff. Let's switch gears a little about, I know you've been talking about hearing science and things like that, or cognition and stuff. Tell me a little bit of how I know the research is evolving, but how did you stumble? That's not a fair word. How did you stumble is not a fair word. I apologize. You know what I'm saying.
No, I hear. Listen, I did kind of stumble.
How did this become something that you were interested in, right?
It's all Johns Hopkins and Frank Lynn's fault. Okay. In 2015, 2016, that the research came out about the higher incidence of early onset dementia based on degree of hearing loss, and that just got me started learning more. I got affiliated with an entity called the American Brain Council, which is a little ahead of its time. When I started screening cognition in 2016, not too many audiologists thought I should be doing it,
How'd you do
let
it?
alone. I use the MoCA or the MMSE.
That's so funny because we've been doing the MoCA since before then, and our evolution and our practice was a little bit different. We had cochlear implant patients who were not performing well,
Makes
and
sense, yeah.
we definitely thought it was not the device and it was the brain. And so we went, myself and some of the clinicians I work with, we went and got certified for the MoCA. So we've been doing it for quite some time. So that's great.
Yeah,
People coming to the same conclusion from different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, don't get me wrong, that was a great screening tool. It helped me direct patients back to their primary to have more discussions about maybe neuropsych or further testing. And it worked really well for that. It didn't help me really counsel as well on the hearing side. First, we didn't have the research that we have today. And
well, it's also hard. The test is hard to contextualize, quite frankly.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely. And then in 2019, just before us, I guess, when was COVID? Early 2020, right? March of 2020. So in November, December of 2019, I got approached by a company called Cognivue. And they asked me if I would put together a panel of private practice audiologists to evaluate their product and advise them on how it might fit into the audiology space. And we spent all of 2020. We got devices in early 2020. We had a lot of extra free time on our hands because of the lockdowns, right?
You did all on Zoom, no doubt.
Yeah, and we all started using Cognivue, and that really propelled our practice as far as screening everybody. My other clinicians, I run a team of 9 doctors of audiology.
Wow.
And I'm looking for our 10th. So if anybody's watching and looking to make a move, give me a call. All right. I'm in the Villages, Florida, the world's largest retirement community. Long story short, we had 9 clinicians, myself included, and I was the only one screening cognition. Fast forward now to 2022, right? Almost the end of the year. Everybody's screening cognition. And here's what we're finding. Patients love it. We almost make a contest out of it, right? I screen you on Cognivue the day I test you. 4 months after I fit you, I put you back on it, and we look for improvement. We also give you a comorbidity checklist now because we've got tons of data on other things that can impact those scores. We send that with you along with your Cognivue results back to your primary care. Now the primary care has a baseline, and they have a checklist that the patient's already filled out. I have this. I don't know if I have this, and it just makes them proactive. These folks I really consider audiology on the front line because we have the time to have this conversation. Patients want to have the conversation if you open the door, and it just speeds up the process. If somebody fails the screening on the Cognivue, all it does is give the doctor the data they need to determine, is there anything more that needs to be done? So I feel like we're buying people time. We're identifying it earlier than they be identified otherwise.
No, I mean, you're doing these tests of brain function that aren't being done on a screening anywhere else, right? In other words,
correct.
And so, yeah, I think that's great. And so you've been kind of on the forefront of the clinical integration of this device, it sounds like.
I've developed my process in my clinic, and I've shared it with countless clinics around the country. I'll take that. I will say I've been instrumental in helping spread the word for sure. I'm very passionate about it.
Right. You're at a great place to do it. You're probably seeing a lot of this. And, fundamentally, if we're all about making our patients' lives better, that's what you're doing. Nobody's
absolutely.
There's nothing bad about that. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Are you still using the MoCA, or are you using an automated test?
We still do the MoCA, and so, I think the difference obviously is we use the MoCA on maybe on a retrospective, and you're doing it prospectively, if that makes sense.
Yes.
In other words, we don't screen for cognition unless we're seeing signs of cognitive issues, which would argue that's the whole point of a screen. So I don't have an answer for you. We just haven't integrated it into
I
our.
understand. Sure.
No,
Understood.
it's actually, these are the beauties of these conversations, right? Because it tweaks your mind. Like maybe we should think about that. So I just haven't thought about it. I think it's a great thing. I mean, one of the challenges I think is, which I think you touched on, is getting movement once you refer them to whomever is their care provider to get a further what the next steps are. And I'm not sure that's very clear, but obviously you're including a comorbidity list, which is great in the test results. And then, obviously the patient has to work with whoever's providing them with care to do whatever's the next things to do.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, do you see improved cognitive use scores after treating them with,
Yeah, we actually do. It's not like they go from really bad to
right.
great, but if you look at memory and executive function, that's the two areas that I see in my population that'll be in that below normal range. There'll be cognitive separates it from red, yellow, and green. Green is within normal limits. Yellow is mildly below normal. Yeah. So long story short, what I'm seeing on this numeric scale that goes from 0 to 100, we're seeing anywhere from 8 to 12 points increase in memory and executive function. Now that doesn't mean they go from abnormal to normal, but we are seeing that happen. And some people think that sounds crazy, but when you start looking at some of the data from some of these other studies that have actually hooked people up to now far field stuff and even functional MRIs.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's so far fetched. I mean, we know
it's all consistent with the other research. You're just doing it on the other end, if that makes sense, right? You're doing it on the end user end. The other thing that's great about that, Al, is you're only talking about 4 months, right? And so, that's a short period of time. It'll be interesting to see what you see in a year and 2 years and 3 years, right? And
absolutely.
Then the other thing is, and this is a hard thing for people to sometimes understand, even if people decline, it could slow their rate of decline. And so that's another measurement that's going to be a little harder to figure out, but we'll see, the studies will come out, right? And so even if you're going to have cognitive decline of aging, does treating your hearing loss prevent or slow the decline, right? So it's not always prevention of the disease. Sometimes it's slowing of the disease.
Absolutely. And if we can screen somebody and buy them time with modifiable risk factors, now I'm not just talking hearing, I'm talking the other 12 or 13 comorbidities. At some point, Mark, there's going to be a pill, there's going to be a treatment. And if we can get them identified, reverse some of their risk with corrective lifestyle changes, just think of the impact we can have.
No, I think that's amazing. So I know you have a book. Al, tell just what's the title of the book so people can.
It's called Back to Active, and it's co-authored with Dr. Keith Darrow, a neuroscientist and an audiologist. Keith has definitely been ahead of his time for an audiologist, preaching and educating. And I met him several years ago. We had some affinity and some shared frustrations with treatment rates. It's just a great partnership.
No, that's great. They can find that on Amazon, and I suspect your website, right?
Amazon and website, and honestly, I can't tell you if we sell a lot of them, but I give a lot of them away via the website.
Well, if people wanted to find out, what is your website, Al?
So the villageshealth.com /audiology, or there's also one this audiologist drturri.com.
Audiologist drturri.com.
Correct.
Okay, so that's.
Or if you just Google Dr. Turri Audiology, I come up pretty quick. But either one of those websites will get to you.
Okay, and if people want to get a hold of you, I assume they can also do LinkedIn. Is that right?
LinkedIn, Facebook, both just with my names. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So if anybody wants to reach out, has a question, read his great book, that's how you can do it. And Al, I love to ask this question. What's your favorite sound? I love asking people in this.
Yeah, I love that question, and my answer surprises people. I'm an audiologist. I'm also a speaker, and I'm very busy. So my favorite sound, believe it or not, is silence. I just love. I drive a car that's really quiet, and there's just something about
That peacefulness of the silence.
That peacefulness of silence. And then my second favorite sound
or the peacefulness of a constant whatever it is that's close to silence. Right?
Yeah. And my second favorite is my wife's Brazilian, and I love it when she calls me Alberto in her accent. That's awesome.
That's very nice.
What's yours, Mark?
What?
What's yours?
The laughter of my children. And they're young adults now, but when that deep belly laugh, when they're really having a moment of pleasure and kind of giving up on all of everything that's around, if that makes sense,
I love it. Yeah.
That real deep, genuine, like I'm totally focused in on this funny thing. I think that's priceless, right? Because that's a moment of joy. And, and in the transition to adulthood, those are wonderful to find given that difficult part of life. So
absolutely. I love it. That's great.
So this has been a great episode, Al. I really appreciate you coming on, and a great topic. I think this is really juicy stuff, and I very much appreciate your willingness to share, your expertise. So if anybody needs anything, look up Dr. Turri at what's audiologist.
Audiologist, drturri.com.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be easier than what's the other one? It's fine if they.
The Village's Health /audiology.
Okay. Again, thanks for coming on. This has been great. I appreciate you giving me your time.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to get to know you better.
Great.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.